friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We are back with another canning recipe today. We are going to be canning caramelized onions. Now, if you are friends of the channel, you know that anytime we deviate from a tested, proven safe recipe, we're going to tell you straight up front in the introduction so you can make a decision that's best, that you are most comfortable with in your kitchen. So let me go ahead and do that. If you are brand new to our channel, we do have a video dedicated to our canning philosophy. I always say, if in doubt, throw it out. I also say, if in doubt, don't can it. So if you are not comfortable or confident about the safety of a recipe that you find online, you should not can it. I also believe that you shouldn't can recipes from people if you don't know what they believe and what they practice about canning safety. So we do have that video. I will link it in the description box below if you're interested on hearing what we believe about canning safety, what is our canning philosophy. Okay, so why am I comfortable canning this recipe? Well, caramelized onions uses butter. We all know that. And we also know that canning butter is generally considered not safe. So this butter, or this recipe has butter in it. Why am I canning it when I'm such a stickler for canning safety? Here's why. We have two county extension offices. The two that I can think of off the top of my head is the Illinois extension and the Missouri extension. And they recommend adding butter to jam recipes to help eliminate or at least reduce the amount of foaming that occurs in jam before you move into the canning stage. So that to me tells me butter alone is not going to be the issue. So what are the other potential issues? The other potential issues are the fat and the grease and the heat penetration issues. Almost the vast majority of canning recipes that are tested and proven safe use water as the liquid that a jar is canned in, or a vinegar-based pickling brine. It doesn't use a fatty substance like butter. And so we kind of have to, is this safe, is it not safe? And this is why, I don't know if I've already stated it in this particular video, but if in doubt, don't can it. If you're brand new to canning, this is not going to be the recipe for you. This is going to be the recipe for those of you who are more experienced in canning and have taken the time to research and really understand safe canning practices. So the reason that I am okay with it is because what I have determined is that it is a ratio between the butter and the amount of solids. If the extension offices have come out and said it's okay to put a little bit of butter in your jam recipes, well, that tells me butter alone is okay to use in canning, but it's got to be in small amounts in comparison to the amount of solids that we are dealing with. We cannot can just straight butter. We don't need to be canning any heavy dairy recipes that are heavy in butter and milk and cream and all that, where that's like the vast majority. It's why we don't can our cream of chicken soups, cream of mushroom soups. It's because the whole jar is nothing but that creamy substance, and I don't believe that would be safe. But this particular recipe calls for 20 pounds of onions. Now, if you don't do big bulk canning projects like this, you could absolutely half this recipe or even quarter this recipe. But we grow approximately 100 pounds of onions each year, and we live in the hot, humid South. They don't keep well here, so I harvest them all at once, and then I preserve them all at once over a period of 2 weeks or so. And so I am putting up 20 pounds of onions in this recipe. And when you look at the 20 pounds of onions, the amount of butter in comparison to that is very, very small and very similar to the amount that the extension offices has said is okay to use. When you compare the 1 tablespoon of butter to just a small amount of puree for making a small batch of jam, the amount of butter in this recipe compared to 20 pounds of onions is in my opinion, I am comfortable with canning that in my kitchen. So I wanted to just explain that for those of you who want that explanation. If you didn't, I hope you just went ahead and fast forward and you're already canning if you're comfortable with it and you already understand those types of practices. Okay, so canning caramelized onions. The other part that isn't really truly caramelized is that we're not getting them super duper dark brown. We're not cooking them at such a high temperature to where they're forming that true caramelized. We actually put a little bit of balsamic vinegar to get that browning to kind of mimic that caramelized. So this recipe really isn't a true caramelized onion recipe, but it's as close as I am comfortable with getting and still being able to can it. I have to make a few trade-offs to keep it safe, in my opinion, in my kitchen for canning. Also, the amount of onions in there reduces a whole lot of liquid, and then we can top off our jars more with water. So it is not simply being canned in straight butter, if that makes sense. That's kind of the whole point I'm trying to communicate. It's not canned in straight butter. Okay, y'all, let's go ahead and hop into it. In case you haven't heard, we have a Meals in Jars canning cookbook coming soon. And in the description box of this video, you will find a link to the landing page for that. You can sign up on the wait list to be notified of its release. And when you do, you'll be automatically entered into our giveaway, where we will choose one winner to win a free copy of the cookbook. If you're watching this video at a later date, it's possible the cookbook is already available. If that's the case, you'll be able to access that book in the same link in that same description box. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials on canning, cooking, food storage, and gardening. Okay, here is my workspace. We're going to need 20 pounds of onions, and so I'm going to be using my big countertop roaster oven for this. It is great for large batch canning and a bowl because we're going to be saving our ends and peels for making onion broth later. So when we are saving peels and ends for broth, we don't want the root end, only the tops. And that's because the dirt is really hard to get out completely from that root ball, and the dirt is where the bacteria lives. So when it comes to canning, we don't want to use the root end of the onion. I guess if you went through and scrubbed it with like a toothbrush and peroxide and you made sure it was super duper clean, but I just don't do that. So I get them as clean as I can and just use the tops and the peels, and then the bottoms will go to the chickens. So I wanted to show you saw the kind of long, thin strips. I just wanted to give you an idea of what kind of cut I'm doing for these. I don't think that's that big of a deal, but if you did it really small, it wouldn't have that caramelized onion type texture. And also, don't worry about getting them super detached from each other, like the chunks from each other at this point, because I'm about to show you a tool that I use to help get all of those onion strips loosened out from each other. But everything that's going into that bowl of scraps will eventually be used for onion broth in just a little bit. And I'll be able to, that's one of the ways that I get as much of the harvest out of my onions as possible. We did that video recently about no waste preservation techniques. I'll have it linked down in the description box below, where we even talking about using the green tops for making things like onion powder. So you can essentially get 3 products out of one batch of onions. You got your whatever you want to actually make the onions with, and then onion broth, and then onion powder from the tops. Here's that tool that I was telling you about. It's our ground beef masher, and we can use that to really break up the big chunks of onions inside once it's inside of our roaster pot. I started on the very first time I ever canned this recipe, I was meticulously pulling off each little strip. It was really not an efficient way to do it. But a ground beef masher makes quick work of it. I'll have it linked in the description box below. But as these cook down, they kind of naturally loosen up and fall apart anyway. So I'm not worried about getting every single chunk. It'll happen naturally throughout the cooking process. Once we have all of our onions done, it's ready to add the butter, and we need 2 sticks of butter for 20 pounds of onions. I've always used salted butter for this recipe. I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but just wanted to note that it is salted butter. I then plop the squares down in there on top, but don't worry about mixing it in too much at this point, because again, it will all kind of meld together throughout the cooking process. And then I mentioned balsamic vinegar. I use some balsamic vinegar in this recipe to really help the browning, but it also adds a really nice flavor as well. So for a huge 20-pound batch like this, I'm going to use 1 full cup of balsamic vinegar. We'll just add that to the pot, and then we're going to be adding brown sugar. This is another ingredient that isn't necessary with true caramelized onions, but it is necessary when we are trying to make it taste as closely to true caramelized onions as possible. It's just going to give us a little bit of that sweetness that we would get with a true caramelized onion. So for a 20-pound batch of onions, we're going to use half a cup of brown sugar. I did, this is homemade brown sugar. I don't know if it would make much of a difference if you used light or dark. I don't know what you would consider this, if it would be considered light or dark, but it's just molasses mixed with regular white sugar. In fact, I haven't been before to make this recipe and haven't had it, and I just used half a cup of plain white sugar and then just added about a tablespoon of molasses in there. That's all brown sugar is anyway. So give that a good mixture. It's really hard to stir at this point without making the onions flop out of the thing. So they will cook down really, y'all know how onions cook down. So stirring at this point really isn't super necessary. Just do your best and make it work. And that's all of the ingredients. So at this point, we're just going to turn it to 225 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to kind of slow cook these, but you could absolutely do it at a higher temperature if you prefer. At this point, it's just a matter of mixing and keep making sure that it's not burning at the bottom. If it feels like the onions aren't releasing moisture fast enough, you can absolutely add a splash of water, as you see me doing here, just to keep them from burning at the bottom. It's not like a necessary ingredient for canning because they will produce their own juices as they cook down. So after about 2 hours, I just come in here and stir. And that's the process all day long, is every 2 hours, come in here and stir. And that really is it. We'll be ready for the canning stage after this point. As far as how do you know when they're done, you really just kind of go by appearance. You want them to be nice and brown. You want them to have released a lot of their juices. And once you are at that point, you're done. So I turned it off the heat and I'm getting my pressure canner ready. I need the rack down at the bottom and at least 3 inches of water in it. This is a pressure canning recipe. It must be pressure canned because onions are a low acid food, and therefore they need to be pressure canned in order to be preserved safely. I'm also going to go ahead and get a pot warmed up to get my lids warmed up. I'm not going to simmer them like we used to, but I am going to get them just warm enough to kind of make that rubber softer. And then we're ready to can. I always do this recipe in half pints because I find that's the perfect amount for our family, about 1 cup of onions. Whenever I am cooking any meals, I use this anytime a recipe calls for onions. They are also incredibly good on pizza. They are also really good on like a Philly cheesesteak type sandwich as well. I mean, these are just an absolute staple in our house. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about why can't we just do a true caramelized onion in the skillet, get them nice and brown, get them nice and truly caramelized, and then can them. So I am not here to say that you can't, but here's why I won't. One day when I was doing true caramelized onions, I made a lot of extra and I put it inside of a mason jar and stuck it in my refrigerator. And when I went to cook with them later on that week and I plopped them out of the mason jar, they were in one huge sticky clump, not loose at all. They had even slightly hardened a little bit, but the clumpiness and the density of that like clumpy ball is what really stood out to me. And I thought, oh, that must be what happens inside of the mason jar if we were to can this recipe. Well, no wonder there's not a tested, proven safe recipe for canning caramelized onions. And so that experience kind of convinced me that it's not safe to can them that way. If you search on YouTube, you will find that some people do. So, I'm here to encourage you to do your research. I'm here to give you ideas. I'm here to give you my experience and my opinion, but I'm not here to tell you what to do. So just do your research, and I wanted to explain that because I feel like someone was going to ask, or someone would wonder, if I was watching this for the first time and I have never made these before, I would be wondering, well, why can't I just truly caramelize them? Because nothing beats a truly caramelized onion. Like, I'm not trying to say that this recipe beats that. I'm just saying that this recipe is as close as I can get to having ready-made on-the-shelf caramelized onions without having to worry about safety, and without having to spend 20, 35 minutes, while I'm cooking a recipe. So there's that. Just wanted to share that. So as you see, we are just going through normal canning process. So we need 1/2 inch headspace on these. It's okay to give yourself between 1/2 inch to 1 full inch because these are greasy. It does have butter in it. But it's not so much butter that it's not like you're canning ground beef or something like that that is super duper greasy where you would want to give yourself a 1 inch headspace. So I aim between 1/2 inch and 1 inch of headspace. I usually load up the onions first and then I go back through and ladle the liquid on top because I tend to get a more evenly spaced out jar that way versus one jar having mostly solids and very little liquid and another jar having way more liquid and very little solids. So after all of the liquid is at 1/2 inch headspace, we need to wipe our rims just like we normally do with canning. You saw me debubble there. And then put new clean lids on, rings to fingertip tight, and then they're ready to go into the One of the reasons why I like to can these in 1/2 pints, besides just the appropriate size, is because I can double stack them in my pressure canner, which means I can do this large 20-pound onion batch a lot faster. You just need a second rack if you're new to double stacking. It's totally safe in a pressure canner as long as you have a rack in between your jars and you still have enough room at the top for your lid to be able to latch on appropriately and safely. So that's what we did here. I think it was 24 or 28 1/2 pints I was able to do at one time. I can't remember the number right now, but I'm doing this in my All-American canner, so lining up the arrows, getting all the screws done. If you're new to the All-American canner, whenever you are tightening down your bolts like this, you want to do them opposite ends at the same time as you see me doing here. And that allows you to get a nice secure seal all the way around and not have one side have more of a gap than another. But once your lid is secure, you're ready to turn your heat all the way up to high and let the pressure canner come up to pressure. You can see that the steam is starting to come out here. Once the steam is starting to come out and it's starting to once the steam is starting to come out, you want to set the timer for 10 minutes and let it continue to steam for 10 minutes. If you have the Presto digital canner, all of this is taken care of for you. You can hear the steam there. It's time to put on the weight. These need to can at 10 pounds of pressure for my elevation. And then I'm going to watch and wait for it to come up to pressure. I didn't take the sound off at this clip because I wanted you to be able to hear how it is rocking. And you can see my pressure gauge here. We are at 10 pounds of pressure. And so we are ready to start the canning time. We don't start the canning time until it reaches the appropriate pressure. This recipe needs to can for 70 minutes in 1/2 pints. If you go up to pints, it's going to be longer. You'll need to reference a chart online for canning something similar, canning onions, canning vegetables. But once the time is up, what I do is I just turn the heat off. I don't touch the pressure canner at all. Don't remove the weight. Just let it come down completely to pressure. Come down to 0 pressure. And once it's down to 0 pressure, I wait 5 minutes and then I remove the weight and then remove the lid and you're ready to take your jars out. Here's what they look like. At this point, we will let them sit undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours and let them get nice and cool. Then wipe down the jars and put them up for storage in the pantry. Hope this was helpful to y'all and we will see you next time. Bye.